My name is Gabe Brown, and I'm a rancher from Bismarck, North Dakota. My wife and I have been on this land here since 1983. We purchased it from her parents in 1991. And then what happened? We farmed conventionally. I learned how to farm from my father-in-law because I was born and raised in town. I didn't grow up on a farm or ranch. And so I learned the conventional practices, tillage and use of fertilizers and pesticides and fungicides, monoculture crop production, primarily spring wheat, oats, and barley. Livestock cattle turned out on pasture in the spring and then taken off the pastures in the fall and fed hay for 6 months out of the year. Then what happened to me, I was always very inquisitive, and I had been studying about no-till, and so in 1993, I had read enough about no-till that I knew that it would be important for us to go no-till in order to conserve moisture and time. And so I sold all my tillage equipment, went 100% no-till in 1994, and the farm ground, the cropland that we have today, has not been tilled since 1993. Then what happened to me, 1995 came along, the day before I was going to start combining 1,200 acres of spring wheat, we lost our entire crop in a hailstorm. So that was pretty financially devastating to a young family starting out, and it set us back, but the bank stuck with us. 1996 rolled around. We lost 100% of our crop to hail again, and I had to figure out, the banker all of a sudden wasn't going to loan me money. I couldn't pay back my loans. How am I going to make this farm, this ranch productive without buying all these inputs? And so I started to experiment, diversify the rotation. I added crops such as rye and hairy vetch, winter triticale and hairy vetch, started growing peas, and because they're a very short season, just started to diversify a bit. My wife and I took off-farm jobs so we could pay the bills, and I was fortunate I had a banker who believed in me and stuck with me. 1997 came along and we dried out. It was a major drought here in North Dakota, so we never combined an acre. So that was 3 years of no crop income. 1998 came along and we lost 80% of our crop to hail. So we had 4 years of basically no crop income, and a lot happened though because of the hail and the drought. I was starting to see things. The hail smashed the grain down on the ground. All of a sudden I had armor on the soil. Because of the no-till and that armor, I started to have an earthworm showing up. I noticed my soil was more aggregated. When it did rain, we were infiltrating more water. And so that really started me on a 25-year journey of learning about regenerative agriculture, learning how ecosystems function, learning about how we can make our farm, our ranch more resilient if we focus on working with nature instead of against her.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and we just took a tour of your place. And regenerative agriculture is not necessarily a new term in the agriculture world, but it's becoming kind of a widespread term for the general consumer. How would you explain regenerative agriculture to a consumer?
So what I tell people is that regenerative agriculture is a renewal of a food and farming system that focuses on the whole chain, from soil health to plant health to animal health and then to human health. The nutrient density of the foods that we produce are directly related to the health of the soil. How biologically active is that soil? There's more microorganisms in a teaspoonful of healthy soil than there are people on this planet. Think about that. Yet farmers and ranchers don't tend to think about the life in the soil and how important it is. In the current production model, it's all about commodities. It's about yield in grain. It's about pounds in livestock. We just want to produce more. Well, there's no attention paid to the nutrient density of those products. And unfortunately, in the model today, farmers and ranchers aren't being paid if they have commodities or products that are higher in nutrient density. Regenerative agriculture is changing that because it's bridging the gap. It's getting the farmer rancher closer to the consumer, to the end user, and those consumers are willing to pay for that. So it's putting more money in the pockets of farmers and ranchers and putting a higher quality product onto our tables.
And so you had given us an example of that with corn. When we were on the podcast, you said, corn, the market right now is so far down that you wouldn't even encourage farmers to grow corn.
Yep.
But would you explain how what you've done with corn has really made you resilient to those prices?
Yep. So today, for example, the current commodity price of corn is around $3.35 a bushel. Well, in 1980, it was $3.17 a bushel. That's 40 years ago, and we're not being paid anymore for our product, yet look at what input costs have done. They've skyrocketed. Costs are, astronomically higher as compared to 40 years ago. So what we encourage and what we've done on our operation is how do we get more value out of those products? So instead of just selling it as a commodity to a grain terminal, we're adding value in that we grow open pollinated heirloom varieties of corn. They're much higher in feed value. We can demand a much higher price then, and we also do feed that corn to our livestock, and it's much higher in nutrients, so we get greater production. Our livestock then, for instance, our hogs, our poultry, our eggs, we're able to market that to a consumer, so we're adding value to the price of corn. And there's many other ways you could market the corn. We could sell it to be rolled for human consumption. We can sell it to be made into tortillas. You can even make it into bourbon.
And how important has the marketing piece been for you guys, as wearing so many hats as a farmer rancher like yourself has to wear now? How important has it been to learn the marketing and the branding side of things?
Most farmers and ranchers spend very, very little time on marketing. They're very good at growing yield or pounds, producing pounds, but they're very poor business people in the sense they don't market their product. When it comes time to sell, all they do is haul it to the local grain terminal or haul their livestock to the sale barn. What we've done on our ranch is we've tried to eliminate as many of those middleman steps as we can and market directly to consumers. Right now, my son has developed a business called Nourish by Nature, which is direct market. He has 137 different products, different cuts of beef, lamb, pork, eggs, honey, maple syrup that he markets directly to consumers. And he has that relationship with the consumers. His customers trust him because they know our production protocol. They know how we grow and raise things on this ranch. We have an open door policy on our ranch. Anybody can drive on this ranch at any time and look at anything. That builds trust with the customers. And because of that, we do demand higher prices for our products, but in our mind, they're worth it because they're higher in nutrient density and they're giving people that quality eating experience that they desire.
Well, I think that's really important when you talk about relationships, to where the consumer, you kind of want to know where your food's coming from. And I think you build that relationship with the consumer by having that open door policy.
That's exactly right. It's almost every day, one of our customers will bring their children out and they'll look at the chickens, they'll look at the sheep, they'll look at the cattle. They'll see how we care for those animals. And we tell our customers that the animals raised on Brown's Ranch have a great life and one bad moment. That's it. Otherwise, they're going to enjoy their life. They're not in confinement. They're out. They're grazing. They get moved to a new pasture every day. It's a good experience for that animal. It's a quality life that they have.
Yeah, you have a lot going on here. When you talk about a multifaceted farming and ranching operation, how many enterprises do you have out here?
So right now on this ranch, we have about 17 different enterprises. That's not including all the different varieties of grain that we raise. I only consider that one enterprise. But what that does is that makes us very resilient. You know, we're resilient to changes, fluctuations in markets. We're resilient to changes in precipitation, to changes in temperature. And with that much diversity, we're resilient financially. Because if the price of one grain that we grow is low, well, we've got all these other enterprises that we can make a profit from. And the other thing that it does is it enables us, by direct marketing to the consumer, we're able to set our own prices. So we become price makers instead of price takers. We don't sell any of these 137 products that we produce for a loss because we know our cost of production and we're going to set our prices above that. And if the quality is there, the eating experience is there, the consumer will buy.
Yeah, that makes me think of, I guess my next point is with regenerative agriculture, you know, really emerging and becoming more mainstream, you know, especially with the big commercialized companies like Cargill and things like that. Where do you see the opportunities in regenerative agriculture for maybe farmers and ranchers that may not have integrated or really started working on these principles?
I tell other farmers and ranchers when they come to our ranch to visit, or I go out and do presentations, that regenerative agriculture is the future of agriculture. You know, 2.5 years ago, our business, Understanding Ag, signed a contract with General Mills for us to teach farmers regenerative agriculture. And their reason for doing it is they want a steady supply of high quality grains for their company. Well, the benefit to the farmer or rancher is that by using these regenerative practices, your farm or ranch becomes very resilient, and then you're producing that supply of high quality grains that General Mills, for example, wants. And I tell farmers and ranchers, they're going to demand it. They are already demanding it. Do you want to be left behind? And then what? You're going to get even lower prices. Or are you going to move your operation in a direction that can meet their demands, and then you can supply them with the quality grains they need?
And so if a farmer or rancher or even a consumer wants to know more about what you're doing here at Brown's Ranch, what is Understanding Ag?
So Understanding Ag, my 3 business partners and I formed a few years back, and our goal is one of education. We will educate clients, whether it be farmers, ranchers, businesses, municipalities, cities, government agencies. We're hired by a vast array of different organizations and people to lead them down the regenerative path. We'll go out on farms and ranches, and we will help that farmer and rancher understand how to move their farm or ranch, what practices to do to move it down the regenerative path. We're working with cities who are having problems with pollution in their drinking water, in their water supplies. Okay, how do we go into the watersheds that supply the water to those cities and educate the farmers and ranchers how to change their practices or businesses that are causing that point source pollution? So we work with them. We work with businesses such as General Mills and many others. How do they move their supply chain down regenerative agriculture? So Understanding Ag has about 20 consultants working for us right now all over North America. We're on over 17 million acres right now across North America and expanding rapidly all the time. And then besides Understanding Ag, we formed a 501c3 nonprofit called Soil Health Academy. And Soil Health Academy is focused on education. How do we educate anyone from consumers to farmers and ranchers to businesses, cities? How do we educate them as to the importance of regenerative agriculture. And we're focused on doing that through various means. We do 3-day on-site trainings on farms and ranches. We do trainings for businesses, for municipalities, and for consumers. Train the consumer, teach the consumer, educate them as to, you can edit that word, train, right? We don't train consumers. We teach consumers as to the importance of how and where they source the food that they feed themselves and their families.
And I think it's important to eat, well, for the consumer or even legislators to talk about how regenerative agriculture can answer world problems like climate change, pollution, even when you're talking about COVID. How does regenerative agriculture affect COVID? You were telling me a little bit about earlier.
Yeah. So I often get asked, why regenerative agriculture? And what does regenerative agriculture bring to the table, so to speak? So I tell people, it doesn't matter where your interest lies. If your concern is with climate change, nothing can take more carbon out of the atmosphere and put it into the soils and store it there like regenerative agriculture can. If your interest lies in water quality and quantity, regenerative agriculture can address those means, because we can keep the nutrients on the farm, on the ranch, where it should be by using these practices, so we can heal the water cycle. If your concern is human health, and we discuss COVID, those unfortunately who are succumbing to COVID, many have compromised immune systems. Those with healthy immune systems, COVID is like just a bad cold. Well, the immune system is our bodies is directly related to the food we eat. That's directly dependent on the health of the soil. Regenerative agriculture has the ability to produce food that's much higher in nutrient density, thus helping our gut microbiome, thus helping to build our immunity. So I tell people, no matter where you're at, where your concerns are, regenerative agriculture has the ability to bring people together. And I say, let's focus on the 80% of the things we agree on, and the other 20 will sort themselves out. I think everyone around the world can come together and realize that regenerative agriculture is an answer. It's part of the solution. Agriculture is not part of the problem. It's part of the solution. I should add one segment to that. Another thing that regenerative agriculture can do is it can increase farm and ranch profitability, and it can revitalize our communities, because we're putting more money back into the farms, onto the ranches, and that then will be spent in the local communities.
Yeah, a lot of people don't really tie all those things together, but that's a very important point. And so I guess to finish it up, what would be one piece of advice that you'd have for aspiring or even young farmers and ranchers that are kind of the future generations? Like, what would you tell them? Yeah,
so for 25 plus years on our ranch, we ran an internship program. We had interns come every summer and spend the summer and learn these regenerative practices. And I always told those young people, I said, never ever stop learning. One of the things about me, I'm approaching 60 years of age, and every day to me, I learn something new. I try and educate myself on something new, even if it's something that I'm not particularly interested in. You have to keep learning. And so I tell these young people, go spend times on regenerative farms and ranches. Learn how to run a business. And then the other thing I tell them, too many young people, they want to go buy land and become a farmer, become a rancher. Don't do that right away. You need to build your confidence in your business first. As your business grows, you can accumulate cash. Then you can go buy your dream farm or ranch. Make your operation portable. Start small. Find out where your interest really lies. Find out what you're good at. Find out what the demand is for, and then produce to supply that demand, and you'll be very profitable.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice. A lot of young people want to jump in. You know, they want to go to the bank, get financing, and they're kind of
they burden themselves with debt.
Yeah.
And don't do that. You know, my son is 32 years old and he's never borrowed a penny. You know, we operate on a cash basis. If we don't have the cash, we're just not going to buy it. It's really not needed. And, you know, look at the society today has become a society of want. They want more and more and more. And they're borrowing money to do that, and they're highly leveraged. And then what happens? You have any hiccup in your income stream, all of a sudden you're in financial trouble. That's not the way to be resilient.
Yeah, and I think there's probably a lot of farmers and ranchers out there that would be willing to mentor, you know, these young people, but I think that there's still that gap there of like, how do they find that person?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And one of the things that we pride ourselves in is how do we match those people up? How do we take a farmer or rancher who is experienced in regenerative ag and match them up with young people? And what we're finding, one of the real joys of regenerative agriculture is I can literally pick up the phone and call a regenerative farmer or rancher in any country all over the world, certainly in all 50 states in the United States, and they're willing to share their experiences. You know, so often in the commoditized, industrialized production model, it's me, and I'm not going to share my secrets with you. That's not how it is in regenerative agriculture. We know that our success as a society as a whole depends on us sharing information. And so how do we bring the next generation along? And I'll use this as an example. So often in production agriculture, you know, you can drive east of here through the I-states, Iowa, Indiana, Illinois, and look at the corn belt, and you see thousands upon thousands of acres with no livestock, only corn and soybeans. But yet most farms have those odd acres, those areas that could raise some livestock. Well, why not offer that to a young person to, hey, come onto my place, integrate some livestock. We can grow some cover crops on the cropland, which will benefit my crops, and then you can graze those with your livestock. Help that young person get started. Mentor them along. It's a win-win situation for both people. And I think it's on behalf of, you know, my generation needs to take it upon ourselves to allow the next generation that opportunity.
Yeah. So another question would be, do you think regenerative agriculture can feed the world?
Well, that's a question I often get asked. And I use our ranch as an example. And you compare it to neighboring farms, ranches around here. Most farmers produce only a small handful, you know, maybe 2 or 3 different cash crops like corn and soybeans or corn and spring wheat. And that's where all their revenue streams is. That's all they do. They produce that on an acre of land. Well, on our ranch, I'm still growing those crops. We grow a wide variety of different cash crops, from corn to peas to barley to oats to rye, winter triticale, a whole bunch of different cash crops. So I'm growing that on an acre of land. But then on top of that, we run our beef cattle and our sheep and our hogs and our land hens and our broilers, and we got honey. We're doing all these stacked enterprises. I'm producing a much, much greater quantity of food per acre than under the industrial model. And then we often get asked, yeah, but you're doing pastured proteins. You'll never produce enough meat products to feed the world. Well, look at the large number of acres out there where there's no livestock on. And I often tell people, imagine what your farm was centuries ago, you know, pre-European settlement. Well, it was large herds of bison and elk being pushed by the predators moving across the prairie, and there was deer and there was rabbits and all these other species. We've removed the animals from the landscape. That's not healthy for the land. So they could not only grow their corn and beans, but you can add these other multiple revenue streams. And if you truly want to be resilient price-wise, you need to have multiple revenue streams. That makes you very resilient.
And that's a big key, I think, with the volatility in the markets, is that resiliency piece. And I think that it's a message that the farmers and ranchers really need to hear.
Yeah, and so many times I hear, well, Gabe, you live near Bismarck, so you can sell your product, in Bismarck. We can't do that. We live further away. Well, a lot of our product is shipped all over the United States. With today's infrastructure, it's very easy to do that. You just have to have the proper packaging. We have customers in California and Florida who buy our product, and it's as easy as us boxing it up, taking it to a large courier, they ship it, it's there within 2 days. That to me is just people looking for excuses why they can't do things. There's no reason you can't build your customer base. Now, I would prefer to sell everything locally, and that's one of our goals. We want to sell in the local community in order to cut down on all the fuel usage, fossil fuel usage. But maybe I shouldn't be saying that to an energy program, but it's true, But there's no excuse to not be able to market.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important piece is, trying to retrain or teach these local restaurants and these local grocery stores, to really encourage and reach out to the farmers and ranchers, saying, hey, we want to get your product first because we know that it's benefiting our community. Yeah,
and that's a great point. We've lost this mindset. We think of food as just something, food is food. Well, there's a huge difference in nutrient density and quality of products. And the more you can source what you consume from farmers and ranchers that use regenerative practices, the healthier it's going to be for you and your children. And we need to start looking at that, and it's going to revitalize the local economies.
And that's very important. So if somebody wants to go and just get more information on you, your ranch, your operations, is Facebook the best place to go? Your website?
Yeah.
Like where do you send?
So our son's business, Nourish by Nature, is the direct marketing business. They can certainly go on nourishbynature.us and look at that. They can go to understandingag.com and find out a lot more about regenerative practices, or they can go to soilhealthacademy.org and find out about the nonprofit and the educational things we are doing to move regenerative ag forward.
Well, Gabe, thank you for inviting us out to the Brown Ranch, and we'll be looking forward to staying in contact. I know you got some friends in different states that, ironically, Boise, kind of where I live. Well, hopefully I'll be able to see you out there.
That'd be great. I look forward to it. It was a pleasure hosting you today.